Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Today, I have the pleasure to have a conversation with Coin from the GMX protocol. Coin, maybe you can tell us a bit more about yourself and what you do over at GMX.
Thanks for hosting me, Johann. So CoinFlip Canada, I'm one of the core contributors at GMX. I deal with effectively partnership strategy. The development of the ecosystem around GMX is what I spend most of my time on.
Perfect. I have a similar role over at Chainlink, really focused on ecosystems, partnerships, and how can we help and work with projects to grow together in this space. So as we all know, the recent proposal for the integration of Chainlink oracles on GMX passed, right? So it was basically a vote which was voted on at 96% for the integration of low latency oracles into the V2 of the GMX protocol, right? So Coin, maybe you could tell us a bit more about what you're excited for in this proposal. How do you think it will impact the GMX community and the protocol as a whole?
I think a few things. One, I was really excited to see the strong support across the community for this proposal, and I think it's a reflection of both the maturity of our community as we grow out from being a relatively small community protocol that came out of side projects on Ethereum and BSC and has sort of turned into what has now become the largest volume perp deck on a public chain, Arbitrum and Avalanche being our homes. And so I guess for our community, what it's been is about a step in terms of how do we take what was made and now make it something that is hopefully greater and focuses on the future. So partnering with Chainlink was really about saying, as a protocol, we want to have immense resiliency in the platform. We want to make sure that oracles, which are an important part of our protocol's functioning, are something that are handled by the best in the industry. And really, we bring in experts to deal with that. And we're doing the same thing actually in many other parts of the protocols. And that's now getting other contributors involved with other areas of risk in terms of managing the protocol, in terms of just making sure that we can now serve all of the liquidity providers and traders who have come to rely on GMX.
Yeah, this makes a ton of sense, and I do want to build upon this point, right? So, in our view, the way crypto evolves, and I know we share this vision, is teams are going to have to work together in order to create the best protocols, right? And DeFi protocols are complex. They rely on many different things, from infra to smart contract to risk, right? And the idea here, which we're working on together, is how can we break up the complexity of building a DeFi protocol that can later on compete with the traditional world, right? And here you basically need a team for oracles, which is what Chainlink will be in this context. You need a team for risk, you need a team for infra, etc. Right? So that's basically the way I think we're moving as a space. It's in order to grow, we need to grow together and we need to work together because the task to accomplish is so vast, right? So having one team work on every single part of the protocol would be impossible, basically.
Not just impossible. I think it's also not practical. I think there is, if crypto and blockchain development is going to continue to address this larger use case for both trading and securing value for the largest assets in the world, we need to know that we have to bring in the best that there are for each area of expertise. And so it's just not conceivable that any individual protocol is going to be able to bring in the best teams for dealing with data feeds, the best teams for internally, for data feeds, for managing all of these integrations, for understanding the structure of these markets. I think partnering is valuable, and it kind of builds on what DeFi enables. It's the fact that we are each able to be a building block into ourselves. If I talk about our partnerships, the reality is that it extends in the other direction as well. If I were to take our V1 or GLP, we have roughly 50 protocols that have built on top of us. It's in one manner or another. That could be utilizing us for trading. It could be people who are building vaults on top of us. And V2 is taking that again further. So, whereas we are building on also Chainlink and others are building on us, we're each enabling the next layer to be able to, create the targeted and better use cases.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's about interoperability, right? And we've known interoperability in DeFi. You have one protocol which interacts with another, right? And now what we're doing together is having teams interacting together to work on a protocol, right? And then the other part, so it's basically, how can we work together on the technical side? How can we align as teams? And then the future, in my view, which is what we have in this proposal, is how can we make this collaboration self-sustaining? Basically, how can we align incentives as protocols to ensure that this collaboration doesn't last only for 1 to 5 years, right? But it lasts for the really long term. It's about how can we ensure that the success of GMX is going to also be the success of Chainlink, right? The win-win situation. So that's the other thing I'm excited about in this proposal coin. It's the long-term view here, which is not only about how do we make it work right now, but also how do we make it work for the long term. And that's why the fee share has such a perfect aspect to it, right? It's basically, okay, GMX wins, it's getting more fees. So the Chainlink network as a whole has an incentive to do more, to make it win even more, right? And that's really the self-sustaining aspect of this proposal that's interesting, which is, hey, let's work together. Let's each work on one part of the protocol, but let's also align the incentives of the protocol with the different players building on it, right?
And I think the alignment also comes from the fact that as a protocol like GMX or any other protocol like us grows, you have a greater and greater responsibility for assets that are within the system. It may be a smart contract based non-custodial system, but there is still a responsibility for how transactions are executed in the system, and that means most of this is being secured by a set of data feeds, which Chainlink and Chainlink's decentralized network is providing, and creating an alignment where as we grow, more and more funds are available. Those funds are available to better secure those data feeds, ensure that those data feeds are always coming in with low latency, high accuracy, a wide set of decentralized players providing that data, creating immense robustness and redundancy. Those are all investments that are owed to, the participants of the protocol, be it traders or liquidity providers. And I think that direct scaling, it's intellectually consistent, and it'll also ensure that Chainlink continues to make the investments, to secure these platforms.
We're on the same page here. I think that's really setting a model for the space as a whole, right, for DeFi. Now, in your view, based on this proposal, right, so I think we understand how it affects the GMX protocol. From our side, from the Chainlink side, it affects us because we do want to provide a self-sustaining approach, right? So we do want to provide a long-term vision for how Chainlink and Oracle networks in general will work in the long term, right, in the future. And then this approach of aligning incentives with key protocols like GMX makes a ton of sense. Now, that proposal is also very unique in the space. I think this is really kind of pioneering new models for us, right? Now, how do you think this proposal will affect the DeFi community as a whole in the future? What will be its impact on the crypto space, basically?
We do believe in systems where, as there is growth, there is alignment. I think I would love to be able to see more and more partners on the infrastructure side take this type of alignment, where they are sort of implicitly also investing in the growth of protocols by making sure this infrastructure is available, making sure that this data is available, and being aligned with that longer term growth. Because I think that it would be regrettable if smaller protocols, and I think small protocols in DeFi. I mean, again, GMX was a protocol that didn't raise money, was just bootstrapped up from the community, and has become this. You want to make sure that they also have that same opportunity. And I think models like this can actually be quite democratizing in terms of, allowing access, and then making sure that all participants, I guess profit is not the right word, but all participants, share in the success that may be derived from what's been created.
That's exactly the way I think of it. So in my view, DeFi has been in a hyper growth stage for the last years, right? Since actually its very start, I think we could say 3 years ago, basically, right? It's been hyper growth. How do we grow more and more and more? And here you're basically in a very subsidized model where people expect things for free, right? So it's how can we grow more? How can we get more users, etc. Now, the way the world is evolving and probably the way crypto needs to mature and DeFi needs to mature, right, is to get out of this hyper growth stage, which, to be fair, has been super beneficial, right? It's enabled so many new ideas to come up and so many new protocols to come up. But these protocols need to basically go into a self-sustaining model, right? A model which basically sets the right foundation so that we can get out of hyper growth and go into a model where people from outside the space can see something that's sustainable, right? You don't want folks who are not familiar to crypto to look into our space, to look at the token economics, to look at the models and say, okay, that's unsustainable, right? So I can start using this protocol, but I don't know if the protocol will still be here in 2 weeks with the way it's set up, right? You want to have protocols which are doing like what you're doing, basically, Coin, right? Which are aligning incentives and kind of setting the frame, setting the foundation for the next stage of crypto. And the next stage of crypto is we start getting out of this hyper growth model where everything is free, everything is subsidized, and into a model where protocols are aligned in the way they work, right? And what this means is basically some type of fee share, like what you have, some type of model where infrastructure is sustainable and contributing for its continued growth, right? And that's what it is going for us, this integration. It's starting and pioneering this new movement, right? Let's start building the foundation for the new stage of crypto, which is a more stable stage, a more sustainable one, and where we can actually start inviting mass adoption, because people from outside the space will look at us and will say, okay, this makes sense. This will probably last for the next few years, right?
No, and I agree. And I think the way I think about this is about sustainability. I mean, I'm quite happy that I'm starting to see both, kind of more from a DeFi bootstrapping standpoint, a lot more focus on, long-term users, long-term adoption, and thereby, to my mind, a sustainable approach. About, as you said, not protocols that are going to be here for the next few days and weeks and months, but we're talking years and decades, and with horizons, aligned in that direction. I think that's important. Making sure that protocols are able to understand that if there was something like, as you said, some sort of subsidized infrastructure, that it's not that the basis that this will be able to, the protocol will be able to operate is on the basis of subsidy. Protocols do need to provide a utility, create actual value for those that are participating, and hopefully that there is a system within it to capture something to cover for these costs. Because in the end, there is a cost in securing a network. There is a cost in maintaining security. There is a cost in capital that's involved in systems. I think it's just that step in that direction, which is to say, look, any steps that are taken today are maybe just proof of concept. This will still take time, but we're all focused on that. And I think GMX being a protocol that just sort of the way with its own history, we've always been very frugal and focused on, how do we make sure that the protocol is sound, because we don't have big backers or anything else. But being able to come and find partners like Chainlink and others who say, "Yep, we're okay to be aligned with your long-term growth. We're happy to also commit to building out infrastructure, building out support for where you're going, because we can see that is the direction." I mean, I think it's an approach that will reward good actors in the space, and I mean, I think there's nothing but positive things from that standpoint.
Yeah, exactly. It's all adding up, and the way I look at it is within the more kind of macro environment, right? When you look at outside the space, the world is ripe for disruption, meaning crypto has been built as an industry to provide an alternative for what's outside, right? And the way it used to be is that the outside world, I call it outside world to say what's outside of crypto, right, was the stable environment, and crypto was the unstable. So basically, our industry attracted more speculators, people who want to make a quick buck, people who want to stay here for a few months and then leave, right? And right now, with the way things are going, we have an opportunity as a space to attract people who want to build things for the long term, right? They basically want to create or find a new system because, like if you look at countries where there is hyperinflation or countries where the institutions are starting to become unstable, folks don't want to get burned, right? They basically want a safe haven for them, for their family, etc., right? And the opportunity for us on a much more long-term view, more high-level view that's outside of DeFi is basically how can I create an environment that people will look at and where they'll think, okay, I can actually build something here. I can actually put my money here and it will still be there in years. And for that, you need the foundations. So maybe the foundations are shaky, maybe they'll change, but if you don't start setting them, we'll never get to this point where crypto and DeFi as a whole is actually a relevant and valid alternative for the outside world. What do you think about that, Coin?
The crypto space has a chance right now to not repeat the failings that traditional finance has had, which has been that in situations with a lot of uncertainty, things have just simply become more and more opaque, less and less information. And I think what DeFi and the blockchain allows us to do is to take an approach that's entirely built on transparency about putting an open light. I think maybe let's hope that the world doesn't have to go through the equivalent misery. But if you take the example of what happened at the end of 2022 with FTX and Celsius and all of these sort of off-chain entities in the crypto space, not blockchain space, but crypto space, who sort of imploded and took down a lot of the market. The reality is that DeFi functioned. DeFi was transparent. Debts in the system were settled. People were able to trade without interruption. So I think that we have to take that moment and make sure that we just continue to focus on those strengths and build on those strengths and highlight how what is being built can make the existing system stronger, can make settlement of transactions possible, can make securing of assets possible, can allow for this to happen and do so in a way that I think will give a lot of comfort, not just within the developed world, but every part of the world, including those where maybe they've never had that expectation of that security. So listen, the opportunity is there. We just have to make sure that we stay focused on being good actors, highlighting good actors to the extent that we can, and not getting dragged down by, as you said, that this sub-segment of the space of short-term participants who sort of come and go and maybe don't have the long-term interest of the space in their hearts.
And that's kind of the superpower of crypto, right? Crypto is transparent. What happened with these failures, such as FTX and these CeFi kind of dramas, right? It was really misalignment of incentives. There was a huge part of the protocol where we didn't know what was happening. We had no clarity on what was actually going on, right? There was opacity. And when there is opacity, there is a chance for misalignment between the users of the protocol and the protocol. And the beauty of DeFi and the beauty of what we're doing here with, between us, and I feel like I've repeated it so many times, but it's so exciting, right? Because it's really a pioneering thing for the space, is everything is on the table. The incentives, it's fully transparent. Why the Chainlink network has an incentive to support the GMX protocol. And there you can start using things in DeFi without having to worry about, okay, how does this protocol actually benefit from that? How does this work? No, it's all laid out for you, right? And that's our bet in DeFi, is that it's the future. And as you said, Coin, the main thing here, and if I was ready to leave the listeners of this podcast with this audio is one thing. It's think strategically about what protocol you're using. Think about how they're set up for the long term. Think about how transparent are they in their incentives. How do they work? How aligned are they with their infrastructure? If something doesn't make sense, then you should be raising it. Then you should be flagging it. This should be a flag, right? It should basically be, okay, this part is not transparent to me, and I need to understand more why the protocol works this way, right? So it's really also about the users of our space and the people getting into our space who need to constantly be vigilant about how the protocols they're using is set up and how it's going to work in the long term, right? And that's the only way we grow. It's really through education. It's really through being more long-term aligned with the space we're in, right? And worrying less about the kind of short-term and the trends and all the crazy things happening short-term, right? Like we had so many extremely short-term things happen in the last 2 years, right? Distractions, basically. While what we need people to think about and what we need to think about as long-term contributors to the space is how do we make it all work in the next 20 years to welcome mass adoption, right? And that's full transparency, that's aligning incentives, and that's working together because we have such a huge mission to achieve that we can only do it together, right? The more we are, the stronger we are.
We can't ignore what's happening in the short run, but at the same time, we do need to be focused on these long-term goals. And you kind of use the term hypergrowth, and I think potentially, I think within the blockchain space, we still have hypergrowth ahead of us. But I still these periods of time where it's only the people who are focused on building who are the most active is where even people who I think may not have been as long-term minded, but who are still managed to stay in the space, they're getting those opportunities to see what is being built. It creates that excitement, and hopefully, yeah, it turns everybody into a better actor.
Exactly. These periods of calm are really for building, and that's how the DeFi space came up, right? The DeFi space came up in when was it? 2019, 2018. That's when it was quiet, when people actually had time to build. As you said, I think a lot of what we built anyways with the space we have today was from a more quiet period, right? So 2019, 2020, we had much less hype. It was much more about building the future. It was much more long-term. How can we actually make an impact? How can we actually change the world? And that's really when we as Chainlink started providing services to DeFi, right? That's when we saw a huge need to decentralize the Oracle layer, because at the time when DeFi started coming up, it was mainly about centralized Oracle, right? And the architecture was, okay, I have this super decentralized set of smart contracts, but my input is a centralized price source, right? And this made no sense for us. And this actually led to a ton of issues at the time. So that's when we already started supporting the DeFi space. In 2020, we launched with Aave, we launched with Synthetics. And since then, our focus has really been about providing price feeds and price data to the entire space, because there is no DeFi without price data. The whole of DeFi is basically about how can I know the price of a certain asset so that I can price the collateral, so that I can predict a price with options. So it's really reliant on data. And we wanted to bring the same degree of decentralization and security that you have with smart contracts at the Oracle, at the input layer, right? And I think it's actually kind of parallel to what we're doing today with GMX, right? So what we did at the time was working with lending protocols mainly, with Aave, with Compound, etc. And what we're doing today with you guys is really supporting much more low latency use cases, such as GMX, right? And here what we try to do is ensure that the protocol never has to rely on one centralized data feed, that it's a decentralized node network which provides prices. And we also try to improve the quality as a whole. So we try to provide more data points, such as depth of liquidity. We try to provide higher quality data, etc. But the main IG which we have today much more on the technical side. So we've been really focused on the alignment of incentive and community side, but the technical side is about how do we decentralize and ensure the security of derivatives protocol so that they can actually compete with TradFi, with CeFi in the future.
Chainlink and oracles in general have a very unique role, and obviously the largest use case historically has been effectively the price of crypto assets. But in reality, as we continue to develop out systems, if we think about the blockchain environment as being a settlement environment and a trading and potentially also providing infrastructure to allow trading of assets, custody of rights, any asset that isn't just simply owned outright without any debt, collateral, or any other use case attached to it, it can just simply sit there without a reference. But the moment you are doing any of these things, so as you said, lending, trading, potentially taking those assets and stripping yield from them, doing any version of these, you become reliant on an external source for price truth. And I think that it's really great because if we think about where I think Chainlink was as it was the leader in the space and it came out, even just this idea that there was a price, this price was derived from multiple sources. We're bringing it together, and you were not forced to rely on just a single party to sort of give you that number. It had some diversity in it, was the starting point. But now we're going much further. I mean, I think I'm very excited by these new oracles. The fact that we are now starting to capture a lot more information with regards to the precise timing as information is aggregated. It just had market depths for information. In time, I know this will extend to things like volatility measures and other parameters, all of which will be available for DeFi protocols to be able to ingest and allow their smart contracts and their systems to be able to gain the insight of that information. And the reason that information is valuable is it allows you to price products more efficiently. You can price a swap more efficiently. If you understand the volatility of an asset, you can potentially again change how you are dealing with those market conditions and basically create more robust systems that don't just simply deal with all circumstances identically. And I think that starts to open up a lot more possibilities, and it starts to really reflect the way that I would say even outside of the blockchain space, more and more complex organizations that deal with risk, manage risk, how they would be looking at this, and it's sort of helping to allow, and I'll just start by saying more in the EVM space, people who are building on Solidity, which may not be the most robust language, to just have more flexibility to be able to create these systems and do so in a way that would not otherwise be possible. So, for us with our V2, we're quite excited. I mean, I think we expect that we will be able to deliver tighter pricing, more accurate pricing, a universal set of prices that are available from Chainlink for both pricing our assets, our liquidity, third-party traders who are third-party liquidity providers or large institutions being able to also rely on that. It just makes the entire system so much more robust, and it would not have been possible for us to actually build a lot of what we're doing at our V2 without this sort of collaboration and the way that we're working together on assembling this data. And actually, I think the real missing part is that the immense research teams within, say, an organization like Chainlink who think and worry about this data, the edge cases of this data, and really are calling it out because, in the end, we live in a very PvP world, be it TradFi or crypto. And, our platform is only as safe as the strength also of the minds that are working to deal with all of these cases, which less scrupulous actors will be trying to take advantage of.
To build on that, I think what's been super beneficial for us is not only working with pioneering projects like GMX, it's also by working with you folks, understanding what comes next. What's the next big thing for the space, and how can we help as Chainlink build the infrastructure for new use cases to pop up, right? Because the crypto space and the way blockchain works, blockchains are just a database, right? You're very limited in what you can do. But DeFi as a whole and protocols building on DeFi are always pioneering new things, right? Like we're not redoing what's been done before. We are creating new things. And for us, it's always been super helpful and super useful to work with projects like GMX, and also in 2020, right, we benefited a ton from working with Aave, from working with Synthetix, with working with so many DeFi protocols to understand what's the next big thing that the space is going to need, right? How can we best serve the use cases? So we started with price feeds, then we saw a need for randomness for gaming, right? So we went on to VRF. Then we saw a need for automation because smart contracts cannot automate themselves, right? You always need a trigger. And that's a use case, for instance, that automations that GMX will be able to benefit from at some point. So it's really about what's the next big thing and how can we help the space next. That's why we have CCIP coming. That's why we had proof of reserve way before people were actually talking about proof of reserve, right? We started with proof of reserve a long time ago, talking about it, I would say maybe 2 years ago. And we released a few months ago with TUSD for our proof of reserve, right? And what happens when with TUSD today is that every time they mint a new TUSD token, they have to check against our POR contracts to make sure that their stablecoin is fully collateralized, right? So for us, it's really been about working with super creative minds in the space, with really pioneers, with leaders, to try to understand what they need today, but also try to work with them on understanding what will be needed in the future, right? And that's really the exciting thing about our collaboration with GMX. We're working on many things today, but we're also thinking about the future and how can we create not only a better experience than what's out there today, but also really create a new kind of world for people who get into crypto, right? How can we create the best protocols out there to make this space something that will be the best alternative to the kind of centralized world we have today?
I think that people probably don't spend enough time understanding how an organization like Chainlink and Oracle's can be that bridge and really help to connect these worlds. And as you said, because what the blockchain does in some ways is actually as old as time and is in some ways very simple. It just does it in a way that ensures that everyone has, well, at least unless we're dealing with ZKs, but everyone generally has the ability to see and understand what is happening, what has happened actually is even more important, I guess. If I think about the way that you sort of walk through the journey, Chainlink has as an organization looked and said, well, here's what's needed, but actually to use this, well, there's actually something else that's also needed, and there's something else that's also needed, and by just helping to lay down those key building blocks, you're available to protocols to be able to really just extend what they can do and have sort of a stack available of this infrastructure and tools. And I know there's more that you're working on, as you said, with cross-chain solutions and messaging and everything else. And again, they're all pieces that just will enable anybody building a protocol, anybody who is coming and bringing their existing data over to the blockchain and deciding to work within these environments, the ability to really, not have to build that infrastructure, having it available and knowing that there's, a large party who's worked on that and who's been focused on getting it right.
For us, our mission will be really complete, and we know we'll have done what we needed to do when someone can come into the space, when some developer can come into the space and code up the next Uber in a few weeks using Chainlink, right? Without needing to spin up their own oracles, without needing to spin up their own infra, without having to recreate the whole kind of infrastructure from scratch, right? But basically, through using Chainlink, being able to get everything they need, from data to geolocation to everything that's needed, just like I would go as a developer today and use APIs in order to create something like Uber, right? That's really our goal. It's creating the right toolkit, which is a lot of infra behind it, right? to create the next gen applications on blockchain, in the blockchain space. And this, I think, is the way we've been thinking about it for a long time, right? So it's really about working with projects today while still keeping the long-term vision of, okay, how do we onboard the next set of developers to really create the kind of recreate the world we have today in a very centralized form into a much more decentralized and open, transparent form, which I think is really the goal of every crypto DeFi participant, the end goal, right? It's creating a better space that's open, that's transparent. And for that, you need a lot of tooling because blockchains by themselves, they just don't do much, as you said.
Great.
All right, perfect, Coin. Well, as usual, it's been an amazing convo, right? So I think that's really the beauty about the kind of space we're in. We find a lot of really long-term minded people who are looking to create new things, right? And that's really the beauty of this space. It's a space that doesn't settle for status quo, but it's a space that's constantly looking to evolve and think about the future and basically visionaries, right? That's what we were a few years ago, and that's what we are today. And I think that's really the beautiful aspect of the space we're living in. Now, Coin, if you had one thing to kind of ask your community and maybe the crypto space as a whole, one call to action, what would it be?
I guess asking them to trade more might be self-serving. No, I mean, I will just say this. I think it's to be open-minded. It's to experiment. I think that the DeFi space, especially, which is a space, I think I spend most of my time in, I think there's wonderful new protocols coming up every day. And I think that, I think engage, utilize protocols, engage in those communities, find where there are people sincerely building and doing so. In terms of our own community, you can come to our website, gmx.io, and you'll find links to our various socials. We've got a very active Discord and Telegram. We have a social community with our sister NFT project as well, the GBCs. But just come and engage. And I think if you are looking for new protocols to work with, if you do get a chance, just come onto our site, and we've got a ecosystem tab. And there's a list of just so many protocols across Arbitrum and Avalanche who we're working with, who are doing interesting things. Just come and check them out.
That's awesome, and that's a great ecosystem you guys have built in such a short time frame, right? Like 1 to 2 years, and really it's a thriving ecosystem with NFTs, with a really passionate community, and protocols using you. So really props for that. On my side, the call would really be for everyone listening to this audio is think long-term about the space. Think about how things will work, not in 1 week, 2 weeks, 1 month, but really, 5 years, 10 years. Be strategic about which protocol you use. You should always be looking for protocols that are favoring the long-term view, the long-term approach, and being good kind of stewards of this space, who are always steering it forward, who are always creating new things, pioneering new things. We have such a huge opportunity as a space and as an ecosystem to bring this world forward, right? The world is basically asking for crypto today. It's asking for an alternative, and we have a unique possibility to foster this new world. So it's really be strategic, think long-term, and don't hesitate to experiment, to pioneer new things, because the future is being built now, basically. All right, well, that's a wrap, I think.
Thank you so much for giving us the chance to chat. It's always a pleasure.
Always a pleasure, Coin. Thank you so much.